Welcome to the GMAT Strategy Podcast. You're here because you believe there's a better way to study for the GMAT, and so do we. We created the GMAT strategy to maximize your results and minimize your effort so you can get to the fun parts about business school and life as quickly as possible. My name is Isaac Puglia, and I've been teaching GMAT classes and tutoring privately for the GMAT for over a decade, and I've achieved a 99th percentile GMAT score and helped thousands of students get into the business schools of their choice. I'm excited to be a part of your MBA journey since we all at TGS believe that our world can benefit from the best possible business leaders that we can find. If this show is bringing you value, please share it with your friends and family who are studying so that together we can make this process as easy and as painless as it can possibly be. Let's go. Welcome to Real GMAT Problems, episode 37. Doing real GMAT problems is one of the most tried and true ways to make test day go well. So let's talk through a few examples. The problems that we're going to go through are from the 11th edition of the official guide for GMAT review, and you can web search them if you'd like to follow along visually. Just so you know, the 11th edition of the official guide is out of print. That's partly why I'm going through questions from that book, because that way, if you purchase this year's official guide, there shouldn't be any overlap between the questions we're going to work through today. The official guide contains retired problems that have appeared on past GMAT exams, so these are going to be extremely similar to the questions you're going to see on your official GMAT. I'll give you a chance to work through the solution on your own if you'd like, and then I'll discuss my thoughts on what to take away from each one. I recommend pausing after I read through each question and trying to solve it, or at the very least, visualize how you would solve it if you're on the go. You might not be able to execute all the steps in your head, but it's a great mental workout. If you are in a situation where you can physically write down what you would on test day, that's definitely ideal. Let's start with a warm-up problem, and then we'll explore some more complex questions that build on some similar themes. First problem. For which of the following values of n, the letter n used as a variable, for which of the following values of n is 100 plus n, that whole quantity in parentheses, divided by n, not an integer? I'll read that again. For which of the following values of n is 100 plus n, the quantity 100 plus n, divided by n, not an integer? So you have 100 plus n on top of the fraction and then n on the bottom of the fraction. Option A is 1. Option B is 2. Option C is 3. Option D is 4. And option E is 5. I recommend pausing here. It's a great warm-up problem that brings together a few themes that we've discussed recently, actually, while also being a good introduction to some of the tactics that you can use on a variety of what I'm going to call divisibility problems. We've talked a little bit about divisibility in the past, but I thought it might be a good idea to dive deep on a single topic here. So let's give that a shot. And we're always open to feedback. You can find us at the GMAT Strategy on current social channels, or you can email us at contact, CONTACT, at thegmatstrategy.com if you have feedback for us at any time. First things first, we're required to use the answers here. So it's not a question where we can set up an equation and just solve our way to a final answer. So we're going to have to revive some of the advice that I gave a couple episodes ago about plugging in answers. The first piece of advice is around visual organization. A great way to miss questions like this, even if you know the math perfectly, is to be disorganized. And that's a painful truth that I discovered the hard way back when I was in your position. So what I'd recommend there is find a way for each answer option to have its own space on the page. That can be rows or columns, like we've talked about a lot in the past, where each answer choice gets its own column or its own row, or any organizational system that works for you consistently. The key is, can you implement it consistently, and can you get consistently positive results from it? If you prefer something less linear, that's totally fine. Maybe each answer gets its own box or its own bubble, something like that. Just figure out what works for you and stick with it. I guess just on that note, the more consistent you are with your systems of visual organization, the less effort you'll have to put in to have great visual organization on questions like this over time. And that's really important, actually, because on test day, we tend not to rise to the occasion. Some of us do. But instead we tend to sink to the level of our conditioning. So whatever you've conditioned yourself to do in your practice is typically what will happen under pressure on test day. So that's what I'm going to try to help you with today. What I've tried to help you with over the many episodes in this series so far is build good habits. And then that way test day just requires less effort. I think it's less stressful if you're confident that you know you're going to fall back on the right stuff. There's also other compounding benefits there, such as better speed, better morale during each section, and of course, a higher score. So maybe if feeling good isn't enough, then doing good is better motivation. So I think it's very worth it. I'll give an example of what I like to do in these situations, but just to really hammer this point, as long as you have a way that works for you, pretty much anything goes. You just need consistency. So I like to write a big A for the letter A, and then I'll use that as like a label for the row that I'm going to put all my work in from left to right. That's what works for me. Some people like top down, like I said. I'm just going to walk you through my approach so you can get an idea of some options. But again, you'll want to experiment with this, figure out what works for you. What I like about going left to right, though, is if there's common steps I need to go through for each answer, those become kind of like columns in a grid. And I find it's a little bit easier for me to check my work and like make sure I'm going through the problem logically. And I feel like I can make connections better as the problem develops. So that's part of the reason I've chosen that over time. So I guess if you're totally at a loss, that's a good reason to start with that, and then you can iterate. That particular point is not going to be super important to me in this exact question, so I just want to give that caveat. But we are going to see that rear its head in future problems, and it's just because this particular question is not super complicated. It's a warm-up problem, but in more complex versions of plugging in numbers questions, I think you'll find it really valuable. For this question, I would first write what's given, and I would also write by asked by just writing 100 plus n over n equals not integer question mark, something like that to just make sure that I know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And from there, I would just start by plugging in the answers and seeing what happens. So I've got this big A on the left side of my page, and I'm just going to start by plugging in 1, which is the value for A. And to the right of that, I would write 101 divided by 1 equals 101. Because it's clear enough to me that that's an integer, I would cross off A in like the most obvious way that I could to avoid having to retrace my thinking. So like a big X through option A there. And usually the best way to solve a GMAT problem is once the right way, thoroughly. And you've probably heard me say that before, but if you're new to the pod or new to the GMAT process, it's something that's very worth thinking about. And that might feel really slow. And it's okay if it feels slow. It's good to know that it's often faster in the long run, since it avoids the need to retrace steps later in the problem. Most of the time, we don't burn a lot of time on GMAT problems doing the right thing. Usually the place that we burn time on GMAT problems is we rush through the setup, and then we have to re-execute on the problem in order to get it right, because we kind of have this moment where it's like, wait a minute, I know how to do this. Let me retrace my steps here. Whereas if we had just gone just a little tiny bit slower at the beginning, just built some habits. You don't even need to tell yourself to go slowly, but just build those habits that force you to go at the right pace. Maybe that's a better way of saying that. The right speed at the beginning of the problem. That avoids that need to retrace, and that's a huge time saver. Very counterintuitive. Again, if maybe not again. I mean, we'll just say it like, if this test was intuitive, there would be literally no reason for us to be here right now. You would just do whatever feels right to you and get the score. Like it would be that simple, and like no one would ever struggle with the exam. And if you're new to the process and you're curious how hard it is for a lot of people, you can just go on any forum and like check out all the posts from that day and just look at the percent of the posts that are like, I have no idea what's going on. I've been studying for a year and I don't know what's happening. It definitely can be tough. I'm not saying that's going to be you. Hopefully it's not going to be you. Hopefully you're going to be that one in a million folks who can just breeze through it. But I just want you to know that wasn't me. So if you're not that person who's breezing through it, that's totally normal. And you just want to think about some of the advice that I'm giving here and think, okay, maybe there's something to this. Okay. So that's that. So I would just repeat those steps for B. Again, not the most complicated problem, but just setting myself up for success on future more complicated problems by executing good habits consistently. I'd write a giant letter B, and then to the right of that, I would write 102 over 2. since option B is 2. So 102 over 2 equals 51. Again, that's an integer, so I would cross off B. For C, I do the same. And to the right of a very large C, I would write 103 divided by 3. And that's not obvious just yet to me, so I would just think about it. And there are two possible angles to take here, both of which are quite valuable. So we'll talk through both. The first is just doing the long division. This brings us back to the previous episode where I made some recommendations around that. The basic gist of what I said there is you want to practice long division enough so that it's not hard for you to use it under time pressure. That's maybe a few hours for some folks, but could be more or less depending on your current level. The idea is you don't want to hit a point in a problem and think, okay, let me do some long division and then be kind of rusty with it. So it's not something you need to be practicing a ton, but I think a lot of people maybe they practice it once and then assume it's going to be there for them, and so you just want to check that. You want to have some computation heavy problems in your regular rotation just to make sure that your computation skills are staying fresh. So that's my advice there. Simple but effective. If you do long division on 103 by 3, you'll realize that you do not get an integer result. And if you are just starting out with the process and you haven't thought about what an integer is in a while, or you're like, wait a minute, how did I do long division again? We've got a whole math basics series to give you a strong refresh and bring you up to speed as fast as possible. And that'll be linked in the description for you. Long division can work, but there's also another path that's very worth exploring if you're not already familiar with it, which is that there are certain divisibility shortcuts that can allow you to bypass long division. And one of those that works really well is when you're dividing by 3, if the sum of the digits of a number equals a multiple of 3, then that number will always be divisible by 3. So again, if the sum of the digits of a number equals a multiple of 3, then that number will always be divisible by 3. For example, consider the number 81. 8 plus 1 equals 9. And since 9 is a multiple of 3, we know that 81 is a multiple of 3. It's super useful on a time-constrained test like the GMAT, and the flip side of that rule is that if the sum of the digits of a number do not equal a multiple of 3, then that number is not divisible by 3. So think about a number like 13. 1 plus 3 equals 4. 4 is not a multiple of 3, therefore 13 is not divisible by 3. Probably didn't need that trick for 13, but just a light example. If we circle back to 103, 1 plus 0 plus 3 equals 4, and since 4 is not a multiple of 3, we know that 103 will not yield an integer result when divided by 3. So that, of course, leads us to option C, as in Charlie, which is our correct answer. One more time, probably not the most complicated divisibility question you're going to see. Just a warm-up problem, just to kind of get the wheels turning here and introduce some concepts that we're going to use on some of the slightly more challenging questions we'll go through in a moment. And yeah, I think that's probably the long and short. There aren't really very many traps on this question, so we'll just stay focused on like good visual organization as the main takeaway there, good execution with your long division as another takeaway, and then just being comfortable with certain divisibility shortcuts and memorizing those. And I think those are all really, really good points. If there's anything that you want to remember from that, I'd recommend just noting that to yourself right now, and feel free to pause if you're on the go and send yourself a text or an email to log that later if needed. Okay, let's discuss a couple problems that build on some of those concepts a little bit. Second problem here. If n is a positive integer, then n times n plus 1 times n plus 2 is blank. And I'll read the options in a moment. I'll read the problem again. So if n, again, the letter n as in negative or nobody, if n is a positive integer, then n times in parentheses n plus 1 times in parentheses n plus 2 is blank. Option A says even only when n is even. B says even only when n is odd. C says odd whenever n is odd. D says divisible by 3 only when n is odd. And E says divisible by 4 whenever n is even. Let's give those another quick read if you're on audio only. If n is a positive integer, then n times n plus 1 times n plus 2 is A, even only when n is even, B, even only when n is odd, C, odd whenever n is odd, D, divisible by 3 only when n is odd, E, divisible by 4 whenever n is even. Again, recommend pausing, get as far as you can solving. Good follow-up to the previous question, since again, we're required to use the answer choices in our analysis. And we've also got some divisibility mixed into some of the answer choices as well. So let's apply some of what we were just discussing, and hopefully we'll see how helpful that can be on this problem, which by the numbers appears like it's quite a bit more challenging for us as a group. 10 times more of us missed this question than the previous question. More on why that might be happening in a second. So let's write what's given and asked. We know that n is positive and also an integer, and we want to know something about n times n plus 1 times n plus 2. There are some good theoretical approaches to questions like this, but in general, I have found it's often easiest to just plug in a number for the vast majority of people. Maybe not for everybody, but the vast majority. If you're the type of person who can easily look at this kind of problem, or maybe harder versions of it, and theoretically reason your way to the answer, and you're getting great results with that, like you're getting them 100% of the time and never missing questions you know how to do, then by all means keep doing that. But that's extremely rare. For most people, that's just going to be super error prone. Like you might be able to get rid of a few answers, and that can be really seductive because you're like, oh, I got through those first 3 answers so fast, and then you just kind of hit a wall between D and E or something like that. That can happen a lot. Or you very quickly get to the wrong answer. Honestly, the best thing that I've found in those situations, and the quickest turnaround for that, is just don't even try the theoretical approach. Just get really comfortable plugging in numbers with good visual organization. Now, if you want to work on the theoretical approach and you really want to improve with that, and you have enough time to make that happen, then by all means, go for it. Challenge yourself. But just know that's going to be way more time intensive for most people than just getting good with plugging in a number. I personally like to start with the smallest, simplest numbers that I can. And since with A and B, I'm asked about evens versus odds, I'd probably just start by using 1 for an odd number and then 2 for the even number, and just see what happens. So again, I'll write a large A as a row to organize my thoughts and work. And recall that A says even only when n is even. And what I like to do is just write n equals 1 to the right, and then I'll write 1 times 2 times 3, since in the problem it's n times n plus 1 times n plus 2, and then I'll write 1 times 2 times 3 equals 6, since that's what the problem's asking me about. And that's really helpful because that result is even, but n is not even. So that means I can immediately disprove option A and get rid of it. Because option A says even only when n is even, but I plugged in an odd number for n and I got an even result. So A's out. For B, which says even only when n is odd, I'd probably just pass over that for the moment, since I don't know for sure. I'd have to plug in, I've only plugged in 1 odd number so far. And just a quick good tip here is when you're plugging in numbers, it's good to test that one number with all 5 options before you pick your next number. Again, might seem a little counterintuitive, but again, if the tests were intuitive, like you'd all study for 5 minutes and be done with it. So yeah, I might give you a lot of counterintuitive advice, but I promise I have your best interests at heart. I have literally zero. I have beyond 0 reasons to not wish the best for you. Like it doesn't even make sense to even say. So yeah, I have only plugged in 1 odd number, and so B might be true. So I'll just go to C and I'll use n equals 1. So C says odd whenever n is odd, and that's clearly not true since I plugged in 1, which is an odd number, and I got 6, which is an even number. So I can get rid of C. For D, it says divisible by 3 only when n is odd, 6 is divisible by 3. I plugged in an odd number, so I'll just leave that one now. It's possible that could be right. And then for E, divisible by 4, whenever n is even, I'll also pass over that because I haven't plugged in an even number yet. Not bad, though. I plugged in 1 and I was able to eliminate 2 options, so that's good news. Let's plug in an even value and let's see what happens with that. So I'll use 2, like I said, to keep things small and hopefully keep the math relatively simple. I don't need to worry about A or C. I already disproved those, so I'll go straight to B, which says even only when n is odd. And next to B, I would write n equals 2, and then I would write 2 times 3 times 4 equals 24. And that's even. So even though n is not odd, the result is even. That means I can eliminate B. B again says even only when n is odd. That's not true. I plugged in an odd, I got an even result. I plugged in an even, 2, and I got an even result. So B's out. Let's try D, divisible by 3 only when n is odd. Well, that's clearly also wrong. Because when I plugged in 1, I got 6. That's divisible by 3. But I just plugged in 2, I got 24. That's also divisible by 3. That's great news because now it has to be E, as in echo, because we've eliminated all 4 other options, and fortunately E is the correct answer. So again, simple tactics there, good visual organization, good hygiene with plugging in numbers, plugging in one number, testing all 5 options. So why are 20% of us missing this question? And further, maybe why are 12% of us all going for option D? Kind of interesting. So I thought about it a lot. I'm still not 100% sure, but here's my guess. My guess is people are using the theoretical approaches I was talking about before, and they're trying to reason through each answer rather than just plugging in with good scratch work. And usually that happens because people are afraid of running out of time. And that's super understandable because there's an absurd amount of time pressure for most of us in the quant section. But the key is you can't let that time pressure alter your approach. It's kind of like if you're negotiating a deal and the other person just gets really, really upset, and then you just completely abandon all the key points that you're trying to negotiate for just to like get them to calm down. You know, it's like that's just not going to work out well. You have to find a way to keep your cool even when things get stressful, and that's not necessarily easy to do. We have a whole episode on test anxiety if you're really, really struggling with that. And I've also given a lot of advice about that on the pod over the years. So I'm going to gloss over that for now. But just know that it's a significant challenge, but it's totally conquerable. And it's a really valuable life skill. So it's worth just using this as an opportunity to like get to the next level with that. You don't need to be perfect, but you want to build it like a muscle. And the more you expose yourself to stress and be and remain consistent with your process, the easier that's going to do. And that goes back to what I was talking about on the first problem of just conditioning yourself to operate well under the time pressure of the exam. It's really, really valuable. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about what I mean with the whole kind of going off the rails with the theoretical approach thing. So 4% of us pick A. My best guess as to why that's happening is that people think, well, we're multiplying by 3 consecutive integers, so one of those has to be even. And that's true, which is really unfortunate because they might not even read the other answer choices. And so they're just like picking A. Just like, oh, okay, 3 consecutive integers, like, bam, I got to pick A. Haha, joke's on you, GMAT, you know, and that you want to be careful about that. I mean, really, as a rule of thumb, anytime you're getting a question right in less than a minute, you should probably double check it. I'm not saying you're wrong. It's just, you just want to be 100% sure if you're solving stuff that fast. So I could be wrong about that, but I've been coaching humans through the GMAT for a while, and I have seen it all. And I've seen a lot of crazy talented, crazy intelligent people do that kind of thing. And that's not really about how smart you are or about how good of a test taker you are. That's more just like, yeah, just not conditioning yourself to be thorough. You know, that's it. And it's so painful. You know, it's so painful watching these people who are going to be great business leaders. They're great candidates for business school, and they're kind of just shooting themselves in the foot. So that was a major motivation for starting the pod many years ago. So hopefully we're helping out. That's also my guess for why D is so popular. A lot of folks have memorized this fact that the product of 3 consecutive integers is always divisible by 3, or like a similar rule. And so when they see D, they don't even read the full answer. They just think, cool, divisible by 3. And that's like a similar effect to what I was talking about with A, where it's like, oh, divisible by 3, that's what I need. Bam. And then they just commit to the answer without even reading the whole choice. Could be wrong about that, but again, I've seen a lot of folks take this test, coached a lot of folks who are struggling with their score through this exam. And that's my best guess. And that might just sound absurd, like, oh, there's no way I would do that. But you get these folks under intense time pressure, and yeah, just weird stuff happens. Sometimes we miss questions we can't even believe that we did it looking back on it. So hopefully this is a window into how you can start to build an approach that's going to keep your scores resilient and keep you off the roller coaster that a lot of people get on when they start learning a lot of material, which is like sometimes the score's really good and then sometimes the score's really bad. And that's super, super frustrating because it kind of makes you feel like you're not in control. And you'll see a lot of posts online about people being like, oh, the practice tests are different than the real test, or the scoring algorithm doesn't make sense. And to some extent, the algorithm is definitely like difficult to deal with, and that's why we made the video on our website, which is free, and it's called "How to Reach Your GMAT Score in Half the Normal Time." I talk a little bit about how the scoring algorithm is quite different on the GMAT and how you can strategize differently on it. Highly recommended. But you see people start to blame the test for their results, but usually, I'm not saying this 100% of the time, but 95% of the time when I talk to those folks, it's that they're not consistent with their approach, and that's why the score is not consistent. It's not the test's fault. I know it's convenient to try to externalize that blame, but we really got to look in the mirror and be like, okay, am I doing literally everything perfectly in my execution? And if you are, then maybe there's another problem, and I'll give you some resources for that later. But man, it's tough. It's tough for people to be super consistent, but in my experience, that's usually what's required. Again, unless you're one of those crazy talented people where no matter what you do, you're going to get an insane score. And hey, what are we going to do about that? Genetics matter. But just want to remind you that was not me. I struggled like crazy with this thing, and it took me way longer than it should have taken me to get my score, but I got it. Success is definitely possible. Might be some frustrations along the way. I'm trying to reduce those for you now. But even if you go off and struggle with this a little bit, at least you'll have something you can come back to here where you're like, okay, now that resonates. Now I kind of see why Isaac was being so repetitive and heavy-handed with that stuff. It's because he cares. And I'm just trying to help out who I used to be. Like, I know I say this a lot, and sorry if I say it too much, but I'm just telling all of you what I wish someone told me back in the day of like, hey man, have you thought about writing letter A really big on your page? Because it's just absurd to look back on how much time I wasted by not doing that kind of thing. But I was so confident that I knew what I was doing. And it's just crazy to look back on that and be like, man, I can't believe how wrong I was. So I'm not saying that's you. I'm just saying, like, if that is you, you're not alone. Okay. And it's going to work, but you just got to make the right changes. Anyway, once again, I just want to tie this off. If you're having success with the theoretical approaches, or you're willing to put in the time to become rock solid with those theoretical approaches to the extent that you would never miss a question like this, then by all means, go ahead. But if those aren't resonating with you, or you want something you can use as an alternative, plugging in numbers with a clear, organized visual approach works super well, as I hopefully just showed you. So again, if there's a note to self there, I'd recommend pausing it, making that now, or sending a note to make that note later. And we'll try one more question together. Last question. Which of the following is the lowest positive integer that is divisible by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9? I'll read that again. Which of the following is the lowest positive integer that is divisible by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9? Option A, 15,120. Option B, 3,024. Option C, 2,520. Option D, 1,890. Option E, 1,680. I'll read those options again. Option A is 15120. Option B is 3024. Option C is 2520. Option D is 1890. Option E is 1680. Again, recommend pausing here. This is a good one to close with. It's a good amount harder by the numbers than the previous questions. 26% of us missed this one, and one incorrect answer is making up almost half of those misses, very similar to the previous question. So once again, let's give you some tools to make sure you can get these kinds of questions right consistently. It's a great time to revisit the shortcut I described in the first question we did, which is that a number will be divisible by 3 if the sum of its digits are divisible by 3. Unfortunately, that specific tactic does not help us here because all of these numbers are divisible by 3. You might have figured that out. But there are some similar shortcuts for other numbers that can help, so I want to explore those a little bit for you. First, any number that ends in 5 or 0 is going to be divisible by 5. And just in case you're just starting out with this, divisible means you can divide it and you get an integer result. We've got a Math Basics episode on divisibility as well. So if a number ends in 5 or 0, it's going to be divisible by 5. And any number that does not end in a 5 or a 0 will not be divisible by 5. So we can go ahead and eliminate option B, which is 3024. We need a number that's divisible by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 3024 is definitely not divisible by 5. Now, of course, you could do long division by 5 on all these numbers, but that's going to be way more time intensive. So there's obviously situations where long division is going to be really, really helpful, but there's also going to be situations where having these divisibility shortcuts memorized is going to be really helpful. So at least we can get rid of one with that one. How about 4? A good tip for division by 4 is that if the number formed by the last 2 digits is divisible by 4, then that entire number is divisible by 4. Okay, that might be a little bit much to wrap your mind around. So let's give an example. Let's think about 2,316, 2316. Because the last 2 digits of that number, 16, 16, form a number that's divisible by 4. 16, the entire number must be divisible by 4, okay? So if you have 1,438,572,216, then you can just look at those last 2 digits and say, well, 16 is divisible by 4, so that whole gigantic number is divisible by 4. It's a helpful tactic. The flip side, if the last 2 digits do not form a number divisible by 4, then the entire number will definitely not be divisible by 4. And if we look at our remaining answers, A ends with 20, C ends with 20, and so both of those are going to be divisible by 4, and E ends with 80. Side note, good reason to memorize your times tables up to 20. I've talked about that in previous episodes, but just a quick hitter there if it's helpful. But 90 is a question mark. Think about 4 times 20. That's 80. If I add 4 to that, I get 84. If I add 4 again, I get 88. If I add 4 again, I get 92. So 90 is not divisible by 4. Again, you could have used long division there. Most of you are not going to memorize your times tables above 20. Usually the ROA is not there. It's probably better to do a tactic like I was just doing, like, okay, well, I know what 4 times 20 is, and I just add 4 a few times, and then I can figure out 90 is not divisible by 4, and therefore we can eliminate option D. So we got a tactic for 3, we got a tactic for 5, and we got a tactic for 4. There's also a good tactic for 6, which is the number must be divisible by 2 and also divisible by 3. But all these numbers are divisible by both, so that doesn't really help us here, but it might help on future questions. 7 doesn't really have an amazing trick. There's some weird tricks out there for 7, but I've seen them hurt just as much as they help, so I generally recommend just using long division if you're checking by 7, so let's just hold off on that for a sec until we've eliminated a few more options. 8 has a really interesting trick. It's similar to 4, which is that if the final 3 digits of the number form a multiple of 8, then the entire number is a multiple of 8. But that one can be pretty tough to use, and it often involves long division, so I'm going to try to avoid that for the moment and just use 9. 9 has a trick that's similar to 3, which is if the digits of a number summed to a multiple of 9, then the entire number is divisible by 9. And we can try that with A. We can do 1 plus 5 plus 1 plus 2 plus 0. And that equals 9. So that stays. C is 2 plus 5 plus 2 plus 0. That's also equal to 9. So that stays as well. But E is 1 plus 6 plus 8 plus 0. And that equals 15. So that won't work. That's not going to be divisible by 9. And we can get rid of E. So those tactics saving us a lot of long division on this question. At this point, though, we're down to A and C, and we're probably not going to be able to avoid long division anymore. But I'd rather do long division on just a couple numbers than 5 numbers with a bunch of different divisors. So those shortcuts are really helpful. I would probably just do long division with 7 and 8. If C works, that has to be the answer because the question's asking for the lowest value. So that's a good argument for writing what's given and asked every time. And if C doesn't work, then it has to be A because that would be the only remaining option. So I'd probably just go for C because the smaller number is going to be easier to do division on. And once again, we're just back to the value of long division. So I'm probably overemphasizing it, but it does come up a fair amount in divisibility questions. And you might see a lot of slick tactics out there or people being like, oh, don't worry about long division, but I think you should be good at it. So that's partly why it's surfacing over and over in this lesson because I'm focusing specifically on divisibility for you. But the point remains, just make sure you're comfortable enough with it to deploy it when you need it. I'm going to skip doing the actual long division because I've done an absurd amount of long division on the pod, especially in that Math Basics series. Where I'll walk you through decimal long division, I'll walk you through long division itself. Yeah, feel free to check those out if you want some upskilling or reskilling there. If we do long division by 7 on 2520, we get 360. If we do long division by 8, we get 315. So C as in Charlie ends up being the correct answer. Now, it's worth saying that tactic for 8 can be a little bit helpful because we could get away with just doing long division on the last 3 digits of each number. So I could use that on 520 instead of 2520. And it's not a game changer, but saves a little bit of time and energy, saves a few steps, and every step I add to a problem is an opportunity to make a mistake. So can be helpful. But yeah, that tip for 8, it's pretty rare that it comes through, but every once in a while. But that's pretty much the punchline of a good correct solution there. I think if you have those divisibility shortcuts memorized and you're decent with your long division, you're probably getting it right. Assuming that you don't do anything rash, like I was talking about on the previous problem of like trying to theorize your way through an answer and like picking something just in a really chaotic, pressurized way, that's usually not going to go super well. So if you have a good, consistent, measured approach to visual organization and you implement some of the content I was just talking about, very highly likely to get this one right. So let's dig into some of the traps as promised. Unfortunately, A is super popular. And just felt my heart sink a little bit here on this one. 11% of us are going for A, which, as you might suspect, is divisible by every number in the problem. So what's going on there? Well, I bet you could guess. People are either not seeing lowest when they read the problem, or they're forgetting about it once they start doing a lot of calculations. It's kind of a calculation-heavy problem, so it's easy to just lose track of that. So bringing us full circle on problem number 1, we're back to writing what's given and asked 100% of the time and back to this whole concept of consistency. And hopefully I'm illustrating this well. Like you could know all the content, study super hard, put all in a ton of hours, take a bunch of practice tests. But if you don't really nail down a consistent approach to not missing questions you know how to do, then you can see big score drops on test A. You can see no score movement despite putting a lot of hours in. And that's just, it's so tough. It's so painful. You might even start to internalize it, like making it think you're not smart enough or you're not as capable as you thought you were. Like I went through all of that, everybody, and none of that was true. It was just I didn't have someone to be like, hey man, why don't you fix your scratch work? Have you thought about that? So just trying to help. I might sound crazy saying it so often, but just imagine how it feels to grind it out with a bunch of division and analysis on option A, do all that math correctly, and then the problem's wrong. It's more than just that problem. For me back in the day, I had to start thinking about like, okay, my whole career is on the line with this. Am I really willing to stake my whole career on not writing this stuff down? Like, come on, self, just get it together here. It's not that big a deal. So yeah, maybe your results will vary. But suffice to say, there's a lot riding on these seemingly simple questions. So hopefully I'm doing my part to make sure that you get credit for all the energy and effort you're investing in this process. Most of you are super hardworking, super awesome folks, and you deserve to get a good score. And you might just be a few strategic pointers away from that. So hopefully we're filling that in. That's pretty much that whole problem. Yeah, again, 11% of future business leaders are going for A on that one, and it's like they're just missing that one word. So let's just pause on that note. If there are notes to self to make for you for this question, please make those now. And I hope you learned something valuable today that you can implement in your studies right away, or at the very least, reinforce something that'll help you be more successful on test day. If you have feedback or questions on anything we presented here, you can reach us at the GMAT strategy on current social channels anytime. Like I said earlier, our email address is contact@thegmatstrategy.com. And you can reach out anytime. We'll do our best to advise if you're struggling. I guess on that note, if you are really struggling with your prep, like you're not seeing results with your current provider or your current approach, or you're in a tight spot and you need some really fast results, then we specialize in score turnarounds, especially if you haven't seen the results you were promised with your current content provider. We have a suite of products that fills in a lot of gaps that a lot of providers leave out. And we also have a specific custom set of programs designed to accelerate your progress. If you're like targeting round 3 right now, it's end of January 2026. Round 3 deadlines are coming up in a couple months. And if you really need to kick things into high gear, then we're happy to help if it's a fit. If you're interested in learning more about what we do and potentially working with us directly, just head to our website, check out the webinar there to get a feel for our approach. It's totally free, no obligation. And from there, you'll be able to book a call and see if we're a good fit to work together. There's no charge or obligation for the call. There's no expectation or pressure that you're going to work with us directly. It's just an opportunity to learn more about what we do and get some direct advice about what's going to work best for you. Even if we're not a fit to work together, we'll set you up with a stronger plan than what you've got now and make sure you're on the fastest path that makes sense for you, even if it means recommending another program. And we're really committed to providing high quality experiences for everyone. And hopefully you can feel that as a result of what we're presenting here for you for free. Again, if that sounds good, just head to the website, check out the free presentation and book a call. If you're not interested in working with us directly or booking any calls of any kind, or you're having incredible success with your current approach, that's amazing. And we'll be back soon with more material for you right here. Until then, please stay positive and please stay consistent with your studies, everybody. Talk to you all soon.